This morning, as we continue walking the halls of the Faith Hall of Fame, we meet the character of Abraham. Now, Abraham is the greatest human example of faith in the Bible. Yeah, we have Enoch and Noah, and man, they lived extraordinary, fantastic lives, but no one's walk of faith is as closely chronicled as Abraham's is. We'll encounter Abraham quite a bit in future texts in this series, but today we start at Abraham's beginning. As we look at the genesis of Abraham's walk of faith, may we be challenged in our own walks. May God nudge each of us in how He is working in our lives and to what life He is calling us. Let's read the Word this morning. Hebrews 11, verses 8 to 10. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. Thus ends the reading. Let's pray. God, we thank you for your word is truth. God, I pray that you would continue to speak through your word this morning, that you would perform the miracle that feeds our souls. I pray this in your name. Amen. As a lieutenant in the Navy assigned to a SEAL explosive ordnance disposal unit, Brad Snyder had prepared himself to lose a leg or even his life. His job was to find and dispose of bombs, or as the Navy refers to them, improvised explosive devices, or IEDs. On September 7th, 2011, he was with a joint Navy SEAL Afghan Special Forces team that was sweeping an area in the Kandahar province looking for Taliban fighters and weapons. Snyder and a partner were using metal detectors to find IEDs buried in the sand while charting a safe course through the minefield. But on this particular day, two of the Afghan allies veered off course and triggered an IED, killing both of them. Snyder, responding to their distress, not knowing that both of his allies had died in the explosion, went to help and ended up triggering a secondary device, which exploded just in front of him. The brunt of the blast was absorbed by his face, and he underwent hundreds of hours of surgery over the ensuing weeks. Brad had prepared himself to possibly lose a limb or even his life. He had not been prepared to lose his eyesight. He was told he would never see again. He was 27 years old. Brad's life was turned upside down. The lights in his world were turned off. Not only could he no longer see where he was going from a physical reality perspective, he no longer knew where he was going in life. The character in our text this morning was in a similar situation as Lieutenant Brad Snyder. Not that he was blinded by an IED or blind at all, but that, as our text tells us, he did not know where he was going. Abraham, whose name when we first meet him is Abram, was once a city of the Chaldean, another name for Assyrians. So the Chaldeans are also known as the Assyrians. He lived in the Chaldean city of Ur. Ur was located on the Euphrates River in what today is southern Iraq. Ur was an ancient city, even during the time of Abraham, and it boasted an elaborate system of writing, sophisticated mathematical calculations, educational facilities, and extensive business and religious records. In the middle of the city was a three-staged ziggurat built at the beginning of the second millennium BC by Ur-Nammu. The top floor of the ziggurat was a one-room shrine of Nammu, the moon god. And in the royal cemetery, it is revealed that ritual burials were sealed with the horrors of human sacrifice. So though this great city of Ur was incredibly advanced and sophisticated, it was also caught up in the dark practices of paganism. And as a citizen of Ur, Abraham was caught up in the societal and religious practices of the day. He wasn't some set-apart moral person. He wasn't Enoch or Noah. He was a participant in pagan practices. I don't know what's going on with my headset here. We got some stuff. I'm just turning it off. I'm just going to use this, if that's cool, because static's killing me. He wasn't Enoch or Noah. He was a participant in pagan practices. Sorry, I got to get back in the groove here. And then one day, as we hear from Stephen in Acts chapter 7, the God of glory appeared to Abraham and delivered to him this message. Go out from your land and from your family and go into the land that I will show you. God is calling Abraham out of his current circumstance. He is calling him out of his comfortable life, and he is asking Abraham to follow him, to follow God's call on his life. God is calling Abraham to have faith. He's calling Abraham to leave his sophisticated city, to leave his wealth, to leave what is familiar behind, and to go. But God, he doesn't tell Abraham where. God's asking Abraham to have faith, to trust him. This God that he has just met and that he doesn't know. I'm reminded of a scene from Aladdin where Princess Jasmine is snuck out of the palace and unwittingly steals an apple by giving it to a hungry peasant boy. She's about to have her hand chopped off by the fruit vendor when a dashing young knave shows up and helps her out of her jam. But the help is only temporary, for soon the fruit vendor realizes that he has been swindled and sends guards after Aladdin and Jasmine. And after an exciting chase through the city, they come to the top of a building and the guards are closing in. This young street rat turns to the woman he has just met and preparing to jump off the building, turns to the princess, extends his hand and asks, "Do you trust me?" Hidden in those 4 words are quite a few questions left unspoken. Will you jump off the top of this building with me? I know you've never done this before. I know you don't know what to expect or what lies at the bottom. I know there is some risk involved, but we are at a critical juncture. Do you trust me? Do you trust me? This is the question that is facing Abraham. Do you trust me? Do you have faith in me, this God you've only just met, who has only just made himself known to you? Will you follow me to a land that is unfamiliar? Are you willing to go? Are you willing to follow to a place that you do not know? How often has God asked you that question? Do you trust me? Will you follow? I don't know how God is at work in your life. Maybe God is calling you into ministry and you're incredibly nervous about that. Maybe God is calling you out of a particular lifestyle of sin, but the pleasure centers of your brain is pushing back against that particular call. Maybe God is calling you to a change of life plan. You had a plan, you had a direction that you were going, and you feel God is calling you a different way. It's scary. It's a little unsettling. What is God calling you to trust him in? And how are you doing with that? Brad Snyder had a hard time adjusting to his new blindness. People treated him different. Everyone was so sorry for him, and the pity began to make him feel sick. Within 2 months of being wounded, Snyder, the former captain of the Naval Academy's men's swim team, was in a swimming pool for rehabilitation. And he found that he loved being in the water. Within 4 months, he was being recruited to try out for the Paralympics, which at the time he had never heard of before. The Paralympics are like the Olympics, so they involve athletes from all over the globe, but each athlete has a disability. Some have lost limbs, some suffer from a range of diseases, and some, like Brad Snyder, are blind. Brad embraced this new life. Most blind swimmers have a coach with a long pole that stands at the edge of the pool and taps the swimmer as they draw near to the edge, so they can begin to execute their change of direction maneuver. But Brad decided against this method. He said it slowed him down too much. Instead, he resorted to counting his strokes and honing his craft. And while this tactic resulted in fast times, it also resulted in some pretty painful crashes into the side of the pool. Change in life, following God's call, walking with Him in faith, putting our trust in Him, doesn't come without bumps and crashes into the side of the pool. Abraham put his faith in God. He left this big city of Ur, and though he did not know where he was going, he followed God. For Abraham had faith in God's promise. He was going to the land that God had promised him as his inheritance. But when he got there, it didn't really pan out in the way that he expected. Abraham showed up with tents to a land where people lived in houses. He showed up in a home that was temporary while he was surrounded by signs of permanence. He showed up not owning any land. He'd never even seen this land before. Didn't know it existed. Wasn't even close to being a citizen of that country, and yet trusting that God would give this land to him as an inheritance. What? Run that by me again? It's like picking a small European country that you aren't even sure existed before you roll in with a bunch of campers and hop from campground to campground. And for the whole of your journey in that land, you are a perpetual outsider. You're not a citizen. You don't have voting rights. You are just there, present, but never truly fitting in. A word for Abraham's existence is dissonance. I don't know if we're all familiar with the word dissonance. Dissonance means lack of harmony. When someone hits a dissonant note while they are singing, you hear it. It's part of the song, but it doesn't feel like it belongs. It doesn't work well with the rest of the notes that are being sung. It's there, it's present, but it doesn't fit. It's dissonant. I messed up a little bit while I was playing the guitar during worship, and I hit a note that I wasn't supposed to hit, and you can tell, like that, it kind of fits with the song, like it's there, but it doesn't fit the melody that's being sung. Like it's not right. It's dissonant. The life of faith demands that we live in dissonance with the unbelieving world. The life of faith pushes us to not fit in. It pushes us to stick out. Though we live and deal and befriend our unbelieving neighbors, we do not live lives that harmonize with theirs. And though life does not call us to live lives that are anti-cultural, it does call us to live lives that are counter-cultural. What I mean by that is that faith does not call us to police the world around us, to have them conform to our belief system. Instead, it calls us to not conform to theirs. And believe it or not, I know this is going to be shocking, that's uncomfortable. When you hear a dissonant chord, it's not an appealing thing. It's not a comfortable thing. It's an awkward thing. We look around to see who missed a note, right? Who's killing the song? It can be embarrassing. It's hard. And yet this is what living a life of faith means. For each of us, this is going to look different. And I'm not going to give you a list of how you should be living in dissonance with the world. The Bible does a great job of that. And the Holy Spirit convicting us in our lives is a better job than I ever could. But let me ask you this question. Are you living life in such a way that there is the discomfort of dissonance? Are you living life in such a way that there is the discomfort of dissonance? Are you living your life in such a way that living in the world around you is uncomfortable? Are you living your life in such a way that you stick out and it's clear that you don't truly fit? Are you living a life of faith in God? Are you following His call on your life? How are you dealing with the bumps in the road? How are you dealing with swimming into the side of the pool? Within 5 months of being recruited to the U.S. Paralympic team, Brad Snyder was swimming in his first sanctioned meet. He posted a time in the 100 free that immediately ranked as the 5th best in the world. On September 7th, 2012, the 1-year anniversary of his injury, he won the second of his 2 gold medals at the London Paralympic Games. The man who had been a Navy lieutenant, working to clear bombs from a field in a remote province in Kandahar in 12 short months, was the Paralympic gold medalist. Life can come at you fast. When you hear Brad tell the story, he'll let you know that some of the hardest stuff happened after he won the medals. After he lost his sight and the course of his life changed so dramatically, the whole swimming thing came up pretty quickly. He suddenly had goals, and life was pretty systematic, right? You wake up and train, and you go to this meet, and you train some more, and you go to that meet, and you train again, etc. But after he won the medals, the training was over, the goal was achieved. And then he has to ask himself, now what? Who is blind Brad? What will my life look like now? After reaching the promised land, he felt lost, uncertain of his next steps, and unable to physically or mentally envision where he should go from there. Like the life of Brad Snyder, there are mountains and there are valleys in the walk of a Christian. Sometimes things are really hard and we lose our sight and life changes. And sometimes things are totally fantastic and we're celebrating gold medals. And then life can swing back to hard as we wander around going, where are we now? Like, what do we do now? What now, God? I don't know about you, but often as I look at my walk of faith, I don't feel like I see a lot of medals being hung around my neck. I don't see as much dissonance as I know that I should. Sometimes that's because I abuse God's grace by living a life that is in harmony with the world around me, knowing that God is a God of love and that He will forgive me. And sometimes it's because I don't think I need grace, for there are times I live not trusting in God, but trusting in my own actions to get me where I think I'm supposed to be going. I fail to follow God in faith perfectly. I fail to follow God in faith perfectly. How are you doing with that? Thanks be to God for Jesus Christ, our Lord. We fail to follow God in faith perfectly, but Jesus faithfully follows the Father's call. Jesus faithfully follows the Father's call. In the Garden of Gethsemane, we find Jesus shaking and sweating and dreading the events of the coming day, and yet instead of running, instead of rebelling, instead of saying, no way, man, I'm done, I'm out, we hear the voice of our Savior say to the Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. Jesus isn't fighting the Father's will, the Father's plan. He is faithfully following the Father's call. And we may struggle with that, right? How could the Father ask Jesus to do what He did? How could that have been part of the plan? Because of His great love for us. We couldn't do it on our own. We can't follow God's plan for our life perfectly. We can't be sinless. We can't be perfect. And because God is a just God, this is what He requires, for He cannot be in relationship with sin. There's a price that had to be paid for the sin that we have done, are doing, and will do. And so God sent Jesus to pay that price for us. He sent Jesus who followed Him faithfully, Jesus who never sinned, Jesus who loved and taught, Jesus who turned society on its head, Jesus who lived in perfect dissonance with the world. Jesus who knew what was coming that night in the garden, who knew the pain and the ridicule that He was about to experience, but more than that, He was preparing to wear the filth and shame of sin that He had never committed. And that shame would lead to being forsaken, abandoned, left by the Father. Jesus was not looking forward to this. He was dreading it. And yet we hear Him say, not my will, but yours be done. And then hours later, after He has gone through ridicule and is experiencing the pain on the cross and the filth and shame of sin, He turns His head to the Father and says, into your hands I commit my spirit. You guys, Jesus is still God on the cross. Though the nails may hold Him to that cross, they had no power over Him. He could have taken Himself off that cross, off that tree, and wreaked His own sense of judgment on all of those in attendance, and by extension the world. He could have decided that it was too much, that the temptation was too strong. He could have rebelled against the Father's plan. He had the power. He had the ability. He hadn't earned the position that he was in. He hadn't done anything to deserve it. All he had done was love those that didn't deserve it. And yet, because of his great love for us, instead of rebelling, instead of saving face, instead of doing what I probably would have done, he graciously accepted the cup of wrath and committed his Spirit into the hands of the Father. Jesus faithfully follows the Father's call. And so, because Jesus faithfully followed the Father's call, there is grace for me when I do not. Through faith in Jesus, I have put on Jesus. And so when the Father sees me, he doesn't see how I have lived in harmony with the world when he has called me to dissonance. He doesn't see where I have gone my own way and wandered in the valley of sin, ignoring his call, instruction, and direction in my life. He doesn't see my failures and my ever-present flaws. No, through faith. Instead, when he looks at me, he sees Jesus. So church, friends, let us live in dissonance with the world. Let us embrace the new directions that the Lord is calling us to, even though they are scary and seemingly dangerous or even unwise by the world's standards. Let us put our trust in the Lord, hold his hand, and jump into the life that he is calling us to. Though we will swim blindly into the walls a few times and deal with different pains and discomfort as we follow God's call, let us follow his call. And as we follow, let us be comforted by the one who has gone before us and who goes with us. Let us be comforted by Jesus. Let us join him faithfully and with much excitement on his mission to bring about his kingdom. And when we fail, and we will fail, let us rest in his grace. Let us rest in Jesus, who has won the medal, who has achieved the prize, who has done faithfully what we could not. Let us repent and push forward in this life with faith as we follow our Lord. What a wonderful, fantastic, and amazing God we serve. Amen. As we continue with our service this morning, let's stand.